What's up, and welcome to part one of our two-part Watchmen companion podcast finale, presented by The Disorderly. This, of course, is the recap of Season 1, Episode 9, See How They Fly. Let's get right to it. We open with the recording of Adrian Veidt's tape to Robert Redford, the one that, Wade saw in the Looking Glass Origin episode. There's a whole staff of Vietnamese refugees working in Ed's secret lair. This is in the mid-'80s, and an older woman who appears to have, basically menial janitorial duties sneaks into his office, hacks into his computer, and unlocks a safe behind a portrait of Alexander the Great. The password in the computer is, of course, Ramses II, who, in addition to being renowned for his long reign and his statues being erected in his honor, he was also famous for having 150 children, which is a fitting password for a safe full of Adrian semen. Right. Anywho, the Vietnamese woman takes a vial of that semen, shoots it into herself, and boom, Lady True is conceived. Also, weird to realize that the Vietnamese woman is in fact the original Bien, the one that ended up getting cloned later. It's kind of a weird mind trip to see that all play out in real time back when, both Lady True and the clone version of Bien hadn't been born yet. By the way, the portrait of Alexander the Great with babies sort of floating into the sky felt so much like it'd be imagery from The Leftovers. I don't know if there's anything there. It just made me very happy to see. Obviously, I love that show. And of course, the irony that Alexander the Great famously never gave himself to a woman, so the super dad is the password to unlock the safe behind the childless figure. Both great men in their own right, but such opposite approaches to fertility and legacy and all that. And Adrian's kind of caught in between by harvesting his semen but not giving himself to a woman. Next, we're in 2008, and an adult, Lady True, is returning to Adrian's secret lair to reveal that she is his daughter. By the way, I'm almost certainly reading into this too much, but when True says that he dropped the giant squid on Manhattan, and he says, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard, then she says, that's its brilliance, a giant alien squid to stave off nuclear holocaust. Only the smartest man in the world would come up with that, and no one even gives you credit for it. That felt, to me, like a nod to Alan Moore and his original comics. The decision by Lindelof to go with the squid ending rather than the Zack Snyder ending, I think that plays with the next thing she says as well, how it's a rerun, how Adrian had a brilliant idea 20 years ago, but he's still doing the same thing. I don't know. It might not be about Alan Moore. Just to me, that's how I took it for some reason. But, the larger point within the context of the show, the larger point of this conversation contains a number of reveals, right? For one, Adrian believed Dr. Manhattan was on Mars, like everyone else, and Lady True is the one that reveals that he's really on Europa. She scanned the galaxy for his specific frequency of radiation and got a ping. Then she sent a probe that is set to arrive in Europa in exactly 5 years, 72 days, 9 hours, and 17 minutes from that conversation. Well, it turns out Adrian set his watch to that schedule and timed the whole, save me daughter message for the arrival of Lady True's satellite. And by the way, the reveal that daughter was the D word that we couldn't see, this is something that a lot of people predicted, but there was still an extra element of the emotional weight that we didn't understand prior to the episode. How this was Adrian also acknowledging that True was his daughter, something that he refused to do during their first meeting back in 2008. So a lot of people predicted that he spelled out daughter, but he could have just spelled out her name, right? He could have said, save me True. He took the time to spell out daughter as an emotional nod, likely in his case, a plea for her emotions to try to, use her sympathy against her, even though I don't think that works. But or maybe he meant it. I don't know. I don't know. But, there was an emotional punch that I don't think I anticipated that reveal packing. Lady True reveals her plan to confirm Dr. Manhattan's location, destroy him, take his powers, and use it to disappear nukes, clean the air, end starvation, essentially save the world. I loved how in this conversation, Adrian's basically outwitted and befuddled at every turn, right? He's the smartest man in the world. He's never been intellectually challenged like this before, but he's met his match, a most worthy adversary, unlike the game warden who just put on a good show, allegedly. Next, we see Adrian on Europa, and he's being rescued by an unmanned ship sent by Lady True. He first has to fight and kill the game warden. Easy enough. All he has to do is catch a fucking bullet out of the sky, which he also does in the comics. It's a reference to the comics. He does it when, I want to say, Laurie shoots a gun at him, because in addition to being the smartest man in the world, and we don't really get into this too much in the TV show, but he's also incredibly athletic. His reflexes are off the charts. He's basically as close to being a superhuman as any human could be, with the exception, obviously, of Dr. Manhattan. I mean, he's old, right? And he's obviously still got it, too, so it's kind of playing with both those ideas. Anyway, the game warden asks why Adrian made him wear the mask, and he answers because masks make men cruel, and he had 8 years to kill. Oh, and another widely spread theory came to light. In order to survive the trip back to Earth, he was frozen in, it was gold, but it was basically the concept of carbonite, right, from Empire Strikes Back. The statue in the middle of Lady True's facility is, in fact, frozen Adrian. When she said he'll be here soon, in reference to her father, she meant that she was planning on thawing him or breaking him out of whatever that sort of preservation material is, just in time for her big final plan. The final plan, of course, is that she actually built a quantum centrifuge capable of absorbing Dr. Manhattan's energy and transferring it into another person, in this case, Lady True herself. Something very curious happens at the newsstand, by the way. She collects all the papers again, as she sent Bien to do every day, basically. I think it was, once again, episode like 1, 2, 3, something like that, maybe even the first episode, where Bien's going to get the papers, and it's like, does she really read all these papers? Whatever. But this time she does it herself, Lady True does, and the newsstand operator says, "I never thought I'd see you in the flesh," to which she replies, "We'll take a good look. This is the last time I'll be in it," because obviously she's planning on turning herself into a blue being, a Dr. Manhattan-type being. But the curious part is when she handed all of those newspapers to Bien and said, "Put them in the time capsule." Is she reading these papers? Is this some sort of, once she becomes an omnipotent being, is she able to then go back and read all the papers that she even glanced at just by revisiting that memory? I don't know. I don't know what the plan is there, but what time capsule, right? I feel like that wasn't something that's discussed before. It's something that I didn't even notice the first time. Second watch, it kind of jumped out to me, but I don't know. Israel is desolate and her seed is no more, and Palestine has become the widow for Egypt. These were the words spoken by Adrian Veidt as he's talking to the newspaper guy, which is a reference to something called the Merneptah Stela, which is basically a granite stone carved with the oldest text reference to Israel. It's a message saying that Israel is destroyed, which it obviously wasn't. And that almost has a double meaning of True about to destroy Manhattan, but maybe she wasn't successful either. More on that later. It also ties in, I think, that exact phrase was uttered in the comic books just as Adrian Veidt was unleashing the squid on Manhattan. So it ties in there as well. The end is nigh is how he finishes that kind of thought. But does anything ever end is kind of the larger theme of the show. So there's a lot at play here. Next, we catch up with Laurie, who is still strapped to a chair, right? The 7th K and the Cyclops are all gathered around this Dr. Manhattan cage, waiting for his teleportation. And as predicted, Wade is disguised as a member of the 7th K because he stole a mask from one of his home invaders. So he's in the mix. Meanwhile, Angela's breaking fingers, trying to figure out, where her husband's been taken, trying to get to the bottom of that. I thought it was particularly funny that as Joe Keane is monologuing about his racist bullshit, he's slowly stripping down into the Dr. Manhattan black underwear outfit, like from the comics. It's just such a lame look. It undermines the whole propaganda speech, but Joe does have a point. He's about to become the most powerful man alive. Waving his dick at people's faces is, in fact, just overkill. And how about this? The whole paradoxical theme that keeps popping up in this show, apparently Joe Keane was planning on starting a race war, right? Controlling both sides of it, using that to leverage his way into the White House. But on the White Knight, one of the guys called him and said he'd been teleported to New Mexico. This was a man who was about to kill Angela, right? Until Cal's reflexes took over, he zapped them. He teleported the man who was about to kill his wife. He did it to protect her instinctively, but that very action tipped Joe Keane off to the idea that Dr. Manhattan was in fact in Tulsa, and it ultimately led to Dr. Manhattan's death, which ultimately led to Keane's death as well. Paradoxes on paradoxes. It's crazy. You see, Lady True had it set up where she's allowed the 7K to steal all the batteries from her supplies because they were rigged to teleport the whole setup to her location as soon as they press the button. Right? Side effects include nausea, ringing ears, and if you are trying to absorb atomic energy, without filtering it first, then you're going to pop like a water balloon. Lady True, with a great deal of theatrics, opens the vault and lets the liquid Joe Keane spill into the cage of Dr. Manhattan and basically just everywhere, which ultimately leads to her downfall. Her hubris led to her demise, quite literally, because Dr. Manhattan uses the blood puddle as a medium to transmit his teleportation trick or powers or whatever, and zap Wade, Laurie, and Adrian back to Adrian's office. Super heavy moment when Angela asks why, he didn't teleport her as well, and he says it's because he doesn't want to die alone, or he doesn't want to be alone when he dies. Dr. Manhattan is viewed as a god or some inhuman presence because of the way he kind of views time and the world and all that, and he has all these powers, and he's all-knowing, but he is absolutely human. He feels emotion. He falls in love. He doesn't want to die alone. That's a pretty emotional moment. It was kind of very cleverly mixed in during the climax of the action. And for the comic book fans out there, of course, when he first went into that intrinsic field generator as a regular human, regular-ass, watch repairman, John Osterman, he goes in there, and Jane, the person that he's, dating, not married, right? The person who he's in love with at the time, can't watch John get torn to pieces, so she flees, and he has to die alone. Now, he pieces himself back together, he becomes Dr. Manhattan, but the emotion's still the same in that moment. He thinks she's going to die alone. And Lori, it actually gets to the point where Lori's like, leave, or John's like, leave, you got to get out of here. And I'm not leaving, and it's like a crazy 180 emotional flip from the comic book. And if you know the source material, you know how emotionally heavy that scene is. It really translated. It was great, man. And right before he dies, Angela asks where he is. John or Cal or Dr. Manhattan, whatever, whoever he is. He says he's in every moment when they're together, all at once. I love you, Angela. And then you see a tear fall down his cheek, yet again showing how human he is underneath it all. And boom, he's destroyed. The centrifuge now has all of his powers and is getting ready to transfer them into Lady True. Now, back in Adrian's lair where they got teleported, they freeze these little squids that have been raining down on basically random spots around the world and plan on dropping them from the sky, killing everyone in a 5-block radius. Wade struggles to accept what he's seeing, right? The squid attack. The attack that defined the rest of his life. He is now in the lab where it all started from. Imagine trying to process that, right? The whole conversation between these characters, by the way, maybe the funniest and smartest dialogue of the entire series, and I don't say that lightly. Wade asks, this is where it happened? Adrian says, you told him? Lori says, I didn't tell him. Wade says, you knew? Did they tell everyone in the FBI? Adrian says, you're in the FBI? And Lori says, I'm their top vigilante hunter. Which is hilarious. It's a hilarious conversation between two of the old Watchmen vigilantes and this new guy, Wade, who is also basically a mass vigilante. And, these people really haven't interacted too much throughout the series, so it was, it was just fun to see. It was very fun, witty dialogue, and a lot actually got conveyed in that conversation as well. Just really, really sharp dialogue. And finally, the summary of this entire story. Lori asks what Lady True is planning on doing with Dr. Manhattan's powers once she's got them. Well, she claims she's going to fix the world. How do you know she won't? Because she clearly is a raging narcissist whose ambition knows no limits. She's her father's son, right? Anyone who seeks to attain power of a god must be prevented at all costs from attaining it. Opus esse uno unum cognoscenti. It takes one to know one. Right, I liked that part as well. Lori calls the Dr. Manhattan phone to warn Angela that the frozen squid are about to drop. Bien answers and warns Angela just before they do drop, and that leads to both their survival. One goes clean through Lady True's hand, by the way, as she's posing, palms up, in almost like a worshiping type stance, with the crucifix in the background too. Right, it's a clear stigmata imagery there. Angela takes an armored briefcase and uses it as a shield to sprint to the Dreamland Theater, and the damage of the squid knocks out a bunch of the lights so that the E and the A in the dream go out, and it clearly says Dr. M. Pretty cool imagery there as well. Inside the Dreamland Theater, Angela and Will finally have that conversation, and it was a beautiful scene, right? Just as a quiet moment of reflection amidst all the violence and chaos that we just saw outside, similar to the very beginning of the series when little boy Will was enjoying one last moment of peace and love with his mother as the Tulsa riot was occurring outside those very same doors, right? They kind of bookended that emotionally, symbolically, plot-wise, everything. It was really well done. Angela's kidnapping on the stage, tired from the teleportation. Will asks if John is gone. Angela says yes. Will asks if Lady True is gone. Angela says her too. Now, similar to last episode where I conceded that, I can't reproduce the power of this writing by simply repeating it on a podcast, I'm not going to attempt it with Will's conversation with Angela, right? Because there's a lot that you get from it from watching it again. So go back and watch that episode again. Not the episode, sorry, that scene at least. Well, I would say the whole episode, but that's up to you. I'll emphasize this one line because it carries as much metaphorical weight as the no one wants to be God stuff. Will says, you can't heal under a mask, Angela. Wounds need air. That's one heck of a philosophy. Anyway, just wrapping up some loose ends. Angela invites Will to stay at their house, finally reuniting her with a long-lost family member. Lori and Wade arrest Adrian Veidt for the murder of millions back in 1985. Wayne has the video of his recording from Robert Redford as proof. That's why he snuck back into the 7th K to get that tape. How about the irony, by the way, that Adrian escaped persecution on Europa just to come back to Earth to stand trial on Earth for his past sins, right? More paradoxes. Oh, and of course, the little nod to Night Owl's flying ship, codename Archie, that was nice. Red Scare and Pirate Jenny survived. They aren't wearing their mask anymore. Bien survived. Angela's son saw her Sister Night costume. And then finally, the ultimate cliffhanger scene, after countless references to eggs throughout the season, many fans, myself included, figured that this thing would all come down to a Dr. Manhattan-powered egg, like the one that he theoreticized about the bar in Vietnam. Sure enough, an egg was left in the kitchen along with the lingering line from Will. Considering what he could do, he could have done more. Now, Angela eats the egg, wondering if perhaps it was left perfectly intact because John kept it perfectly intact, right? Like, he would have the power to do that, and he, or she rather, test out her potential powers by stepping onto the pool. Could she have Dr. Manhattan powers now? Is it possible that it's all in her head and she's making something out of nothing, that her foot is going, to go right into the water rather than hovering on top of it? Sure. But the cliffhanger is left for us to chew on, possibly forever, because, again, there may not be another season. We still don't know what the deal is with all that. The only small gripe I had with the entire episode, and honestly the only small gripe I had basically with the entire show as a whole, was this voiceover at the end when Dr. Manhattan is explaining that he can transfer his powers into an egg. Bitch, we knew that. We knew that. I didn't need the reminder. I think people would have understood what was happening in real time, especially when she goes to step on the water. And for anyone who didn't get it on the first watch, they could easily just Google it, right? You can have your eureka moment by reading someone else's article or listening to a podcast like this. I thought that cheapened an otherwise extremely powerful scene. But if that's my biggest and quite frankly only complaint about a show, then damn, dude, this may just be one of the best shows of television, like legitimately ever made. It was brilliant start to finish. It's certainly my number one show of 2019, though I'm working on that list and full top 10 will be out in the Disorderly soon. But this is the finale after all, and I wanted to make it a little special. So this is part 1 of the Watchmen review. Part 2 will feature a special guest, a friend of mine from the MMA world, but also one of the biggest comic book fans in the world. He works for Barstool Sports. He's the host of the My Mom's Basement podcast and co-host What the Hell is Happening, a really good video series with the guys from Lights Camera Barstool. Similar to this show, basically breaking down episodes and adding, context and analysis and all that. They're currently doing The Mandalorian as well as The Watchmen, so I highly recommend you check out those videos as well. But today's Tuesday. I'll be dropping that episode on Thursday, so stay tuned and thank you for listening. Rate, review, subscribe, of course, and I'll see you guys Thursday. Peace. What's up, and welcome to part 2 of the Watchmen Companion podcast presented by The Disorderly. For the final episode of this show, we're joined by Robbie Fox of Barstool Sports to sort of recap the season and share our thoughts on what was honestly one of the best seasons of television I've ever seen, personally. So why waste time with the intro, right? Let's get right into it. Here's Robbie Fox. Give him a follow on Twitter while you listen, at Robbie Barstool. Here he is. Enjoy.
Yo.
What's up, man? How you been?
Good. How are you?
Wonderful. Well, welcome to the Watchmen Companion podcast, because I think all the other times you've been on, it's been the MMA show. This is my television companion podcast presented by The Disorderly, so I appreciate the time.
Hell yeah. I'm glad to be here. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, you sound great.
Awesome.
All right, so I already did my normal breakdown of episode 9, and this is more of a discussion and kind of reflection on the season as a whole. Now, I know you've been doing the What in the Hell is Happening show for Barstool, so you've essentially studied this season rather than just watching it as a normal viewer, which obviously is a very different experience, an experience that most people probably, most like normal-brained people probably don't do. But I'm in the same boat where I'm watching a TV show, but it's almost like you're researching what's going on, every single detail of it. So before we get into the thick of things, what was your previous history with Watchmen? How familiar were you, before the show started?
So I got really caught into the marketing behind the Watchmen movie, the Zack Snyder Watchmen movie back in 2008. And that trailer, still to this day, is maybe my favorite movie trailer ever.
What was that song that was playing?
Okay,
thank you. I knew that.
Yes.
Like that's what I remember is that song. So
that trailer is just like my favorite thing in the world, and I was so into that. I bought the graphic novel before the movie came out. I read it as like a 10-year-old. I didn't really, obviously, a 10-year-old reading a book as deep and mature as Watchmen. Obviously, didn't pick everything up. I was mostly reading it for surface level superhero stuff. Saw the movie, wound up loving the movie. I've seen the movie multiple times since. I still enjoy it to this day. I recognize why people don't, obviously. But coming into this show, I was sort of like, they're going to do Watchmen. They're going to do a sequel to Watchmen. And I was watching the trailers, and I was very much like, are they just going to pull the shit that looked cool from Watchmen, and they're going to put it in this TV show, and it's not even going to be like the original story? I didn't know what it was, and I was looking at it like a skeptic. Like, really, I look back, and now I'm like, what an a-hole I was for looking at this so doubtfully when it became what it became. So I guess that, going into the show, I was a Watchmen fan, but I was very skeptical.
Yeah, it's funny because I feel like I come from, I think there's two camps, basically. It's like the Lindelof fanboys and then the Watchmen fanboys, and I'm somewhat in the middle, but not really. So my whole experience was, I love Leftovers, my favorite show of all time. I finished Leftovers back in whatever it was, 2017. I hear buzz that Lindelof's next project is going to be Watchmen. So obviously I was familiar with the movie. I don't think I ever even watched it when it came out, or I saw like bits and pieces on TV or something. So I wasn't that familiar with the whole source material in general, but I ordered the graphic novel because I was excited for Lindelof's next project. So I actually went back and checked. It was November 2017. I got the novel, read the shit out of that, then watched the movie for the first time after I finished the novel. I liked it. Once again, I could see where people are coming from with it's got its flaws, obviously, but I thought it was solid. I didn't think it deserved the hate that I got. But I basically went in excited for Lindelof's project, hyped myself up almost too much, I would say, and it still delivered. So I feel like I came from a different approach to it, but almost like the movie got you into the book, this show got me into the book.
Yeah, that's cool. I think it got so many people into the book, especially just doing the show, having people reach out to us. They've been like, oh my God, now I have to read the book. Now I have to get into that. And I think what more could you ask for out of a show like Watchmen, where it's celebrating the legacy of Watchmen for people to go back and basically discover the book through that. And I was a Lindelof fan too. Now, I've never seen The Leftovers. I probably should, but I was a big Lost fan. Lost is one of my favorite shows of all time. I'm one of the people that binged Lost after it was already off the air. So all that stuff in the later seasons that people didn't really enjoy, it didn't hit me as harshly because it wasn't like I wasn't week to week. It wasn't week to week. I wasn't in there for the years and years before that. So I really enjoy Lost as a series all the way through. And I guess that's another reason why I probably should have been clued in early on that this thing was going to be friggin' amazing what it is. But obviously, I didn't get there until about episode 2 or 3, and then I was fully bought in.
Yeah, it's funny. I actually had the same experience with Lost. I think it was like all on Netflix at one point, and I think that's when I watched it.
That's when I watched it. A couple of years ago, it was all on Netflix. I think there's 121 episodes, something ridiculous like that. But love that show. I mean, Lost, especially the first few seasons, some of the best TV ever.
Yeah, and I don't think it's a hot take, and I'm sure you've heard this from other people, especially because you like Watchmen, but The Leftovers, that should be next on your list. It's short too. It's like 2.5 seasons. It's my favorite all-time show, and I feel like I watch a lot of TV shows. So that's a lot of things to compare it to, and it's my number one favorite show. I loved it.
That's definitely a huge recommendation. I think next on my list, I've been trying to do this for a long time. Over Christmas break, I'm going to try to watch The Sopranos for the first time. I've never seen a second of The Sopranos. After that, I'm very down for The Leftovers.
Yeah, so actually, to bring it full circle, Sopranos was my favorite show. Same thing, too, where it was like my parents got HBO when I was like a sophomore in college, so I had their login, and they have their whole library on there, obviously. So as soon as they got that, I went back and watched Sopranos well after the show was over, and that was my favorite show. And I had this moment for the series finale of Leftovers. I was like, if they stick the landing, if this is like a on par with the rest of the season and all this stuff, this will trump Sopranos is my favorite all-time show. Not that at all. It's just stupid. You attach this meaning to it in your own head. But for me, I was like, oh, this is a big deal. Leftovers could do the impossible.
Oh no, of course. Bro, you're talking to the biggest nerd. I'm the exact same way. I feel like you and me are cut from the same cloth, and I'm glad to hear that you really like The Sopranos too, because that makes me think I'm gonna like it. All that kind of stuff was filmed right around where I grew up.
All right.
The Bada Bing, I drove past Bada Bing every day on my way to college. Pizza Land that they show in the beginning, that's the pizza place that we order from. So I think I'm going to be very into watching The Sopranos, if only for, oh my God, that's down the block from me. Oh my God, that's up the street. stuff like that.
Yeah, it's very cool. I think from Connecticut, all we really have going for us is Gilmore Girls. So I didn't really connect.
Hey, people love Gilmore Girls.
I know. I just feel like it wasn't for me. I wasn't the target audience, but maybe I should give it another shot. Who knows? All right, so we went over Lindelof and how familiar you were. Let's just start here, actually. What was your overall, score for this show? I don't need a 0 to 100 type deal, but how does this stack up against the other shows of 2019? Where does it land on your all-time rankings for you personally? Now that it's wrapped up, I know it just recently wrapped up, but where are you sort of putting this on the standings?
I think it's fair to call season 1 of Watchmen, if you're calling it season 1. I know Lindelof has gone back and forth a few times on whether or not that there will be a continued thing. I'm of the mindset this was a perfect season. I don't even want to see any more Watchmen because this was so perfect. And I trust Lindelof after this. I really do. But this was, I think, as a season, stacks up among the best seasons of television I've ever seen in my life. And I don't know how to necessarily rank it above or before others, because I also have a horrible memory, so I won't remember the specific seasons I enjoyed, maybe from Breaking Bad or Game of Thrones or any of these other shows. But it was flawless. I thought beginning to end, I was blown away by how good it was every week. I think Pedro Pascal, who plays the Mandalorian on Disney Plus, he actually tweeted that Watchmen feels like it's better than we deserve it to be. And I don't know, that resonated with me. I was like, no, that's how I feel. Every week I would sit down and watch Watchmen, and I love a show when every week Sunday at 9 I would turn all the lights in my apartment off except I was like so locked in. I felt like
the theater
like
experience.
The early days, yes, the early days of me watching The Walking Dead, I did the same thing. So I think this has to rank among the best of them. Every week I was so locked in. I was so, how can they make this, expand upon the rest? And even in the beginning when things are not clear, it's that classic Lindelof mystery stuff.
Right.
And you kind of have that worry in the back of your head. Is he going to pay everything off? The fact that he did pay everything off, especially in the last 2 episodes, makes this what it is for me. And I also said I would add Watchmen to the list of things where I consider the sequel better than the original. I like the story of the Watchmen television show better than any Watchmen story I've ever read before, whether it be the graphic novel or the movie.
Yeah, no, I agree. I actually heard you say that on the what is the official name? Like, when the hell is happening?
I think I did. Yeah.
Yeah. I heard you say the same thing, and that makes perfect sense. I didn't think about it in terms of that, like, because it is a classic sequel. I think he called it a remix. That was like his official terminology in the beginning. But it's a sequel, 100% sequel, and I do think it is better. I'm basically comparing it to the graphic novel, and that's like hard to do, to compare a novel to an HBO series. It's so different. It's like apples and oranges, which is why I also have trouble ranking it amongst other TV shows, because we don't know what it is yet. Like you said, is it season 1? Is it just a one like closed story arc? I've heard rumors that the director from Black Panther is going to do a season 2 maybe, or someone else is going to pick it up and run with it. And like, what? So what is this?
Would you want to see that?
I don't know. I think I would watch it. I would definitely watch it. Let's not get crazy. But I think I would watch it with and try to be fair about, like, all right, I'm going to evaluate Lindelof's season as its own, and then if someone else wants to run with it, it's almost like a different thing. I don't know. I'd have trouble doing that. But I don't think, say it was like disappointing, I don't think it would undermine what Lindelof did.
No, I don't think so either. I think Lindelof being able to stick the ending in the finale pretty much sealed his fate. As long as he doesn't come back for season 2, I don't think you could undo anything he did with season 1.
100% agree. And then the thing with Leftovers too, you just reminded me with the way you worded it. He builds a mystery, and you're like, all right, like, is this ever going to resolve? And like, as soon as you're expecting a payoff, there's like 10 more mysteries introduced, and that is his style. And I think a lot of people criticize Lost because it kind of went off the rails at the end or whatever. Leftovers does not. And I've told so many people about Leftovers and got like people directly in my life to watch it, and then they're like, I don't know, man. I'm like, what episode are you on? They're like 4, and I was like, just trust me, like, stick it out. It'll pay off in the end. You just have to like put your faith in Lindelof that he will bring you home.
Yeah, that's who he is, I guess, and God bless him, because everything he did in this show landed. Everything he did in this show landed for me. Every week, I almost felt like a broken record coming in to do what the hell is going on or what the hell is happening. Because I would come in and be like, yeah, it was amazing. It was better than the last one. Every episode.
Right. No, I 100% agree. And this is more your neck of the woods, I think, but I'm sure you're a Trent Reznor fan, 9 Inch Nails, all that.
Yep.
He has so much to do with the world building of this show. I feel like the way he creates the soundtracks, and then I've been listening to, he has like volume 1 and volume 2. I don't know if 3's out yet, of like the soundtrack from Watchmen. I've just been listening to that, as I'm driving. Like, it's like it's just ambient noise, but I don't know, something about it, like, it creates this entire feel of the show. It's almost like, didn't he do the music for Social Network too?
I think he did. Yeah, he did Social Network. He did Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. He's been into, he's got a partner, and the two of them do movie scores all the time.
Yeah,
television
Atticus.
Scores. Yeah, I think Atticus something.
Yeah.
This one was the one that was the most prominent for me, where as I was watching Watchmen, I was just blown away by every second of the score as well. Like you said, it creates that world building. It creates the atmosphere. It puts you in the mindset for Watchmen. And Watchmen's a kind of story where you kind of need to be in that different mindset for it to really click. You kind of need to be in that world. You need to be surrounded by it. And Trent Reznor was as important as almost anybody in doing that.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's a million examples of this, but just because it was in the last episode, it's just fresh in my mind. Or no, 2 episodes ago, the Dr. Manhattan one, when she's talking to Dr. Manhattan and realizes that she started all this by, basically asking Will Reeves those questions, and then you hear the synth start to like pump in from the background as she's coming to the realization that she caught. I was like, it just, everything about the way they use music in this show, which sometimes, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's a huge part of it, but a lot of times I watch a show and the music won't be something that sticks in my memory. This was such a prominent part of this series that it really, like, I don't know, it changed the whole thing for me. It changed the whole vibe.
Totally. The big classical scores behind all the Adrian Veidt stuff, the way they cut it off in the finale, when Looking Glass hits him, that was great. I even thought in the finale that moment where Angela is talking to Will Reeves in the theater, and they're kind of having that familiar moment or whatever, like the family aspects.
Yeah, familial. I know that.
Whatever that word is. That word is friggin' tricky, man. I tried. I really tried for it.
Swing and a miss, Robbie. That's right.
The score during that was awesome. The way it was building up, it really pulled on your heartstrings. Like it felt emotional. The score helped make that a more emotional moment than it even was.
Yeah, actually, I think the biggest save as far as the score goes, I loved everything about this show. The only even nitpicky thing I could do, and I talked about it in the recap, was at the end when she finds the egg and they do the voiceover of John Osterman talking about how he can put his powers into an egg. And I was like, I feel like they didn't need the voiceover. I feel like the audience would have picked up on if she's got an egg and then ate it and stepped on the water, and like it felt like they're kind of spoon feeding it. But they're also playing it with like the emotional piano in the background, and you could tell she was like remembering her late husband's words. Then I was like, all right, the piano like saved that scene for me, because that was the only. And by the way, if that's your only problem with the entire show, then it's like clearly an amazing show. But I was just like, man, like I knew that was coming. I just wish they didn't spell it out for you. But the piano saved it, I think. So I don't know, man. It was great.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I do think sometimes things can go unexplained, but I didn't have too much of an issue because I thought it was maybe more like stylistic than it was, let's explain this. Because the way they did it was very, watch the egg and all that. I thought the way they put it together was good enough where I excused the heavy-handedness of it all.
Right. It was like it happened, and I was like, I didn't need the explanation. But then, like, watching it play out, I was like, all right, this works. Like, it just, like, got me. Getting into, like, the more nitty-gritty details quickly, I want to talk about Regina King because she's quickly becoming one of my favorite actresses. Not if, but when you watch Leftovers. She's in season 2 and 3. You'll fall in love with her in that one, too. She's in, it's like 8 Seconds. It's like a Netflix original film. She's great in that. She's been amazing, and she was such a huge part of this season. But what did you think about her performance? The character of Sister Night, which obviously isn't in the comics or the movie, that's a Lindelof creation. The way that character kind of tied into the Watchmen universe instead of feeling like it was something outside of it, it was like, oh, of course she's part of this universe. It all kind of fit. What are your thoughts on just that entire experience with her?
I thought she was fantastic from the jump. We had that episode, I think it was episode 4. It was very Laurie-based, and that's when she's in the Dr. Manhattan booth calling him and all that. I remember watching that and being like, this is really cool. It's the most direct Watchmen sequel we're getting. We're seeing Silk Spectre or whatever. But watching that, I remember being like, man, I would love to go back to Regina King. I would love to go back to Angela Abar. And kind of recognizing that moment like, oh, man, they made me care about that character more than like the actual story of Watchmen. So I was in on that. I love the parallel between her and Will Reeves of, she paints her eyes black and we learn later that he painted his eyes white.
Yep.
The poetry in that was gorgeous. And everything from the moment Lady True says like, hey, Dr. Manhattan is living among us. He's here. And, she has that moment where she doesn't react and Lady True thinks it's sort of strange. Everything from that moment on, I thought she cranked it up to 11 and was just next level. I couldn't believe that she didn't get nominated for an Emmy, or Jeremy Irons didn't get nominated for an Emmy. He went for it the entire show. He was maybe my favorite actor in the actual show. But there was nobody that I felt didn't handle their roles well, except I don't want to say except Dr. Manhattan. When Cal was Dr. Manhattan, he did fine, but man, that bald cap was weird.
Yeah, it felt. You're right. I don't know how to explain it, but you're definitely right. Like even like just the way he looked, like when he's in the cage in the last episode, like I don't know, something about him just looked off. It almost looked like I don't know, like almost like human but not human. I understand he's got blue glowing skin, but there's something about it that was like a little off. I know exactly what you're saying. I can't put my finger on it. It didn't
ruin anything for me. It just every time I saw him when he was glowing, he looked all right. I thought too. Like whenever he was glowing, I was like, all right, cool. Whenever he wasn't, and he just had that pale blue skin, thought that was a little strange looking.
Yeah, I agree. But Jeremy Irons for sure. Especially because his whole story arc was like its own separate thing, and it was so weird and off the wall, and like I still don't understand half of it. But
yeah,
that's like the one thing where I was like, I really don't like. In this companion podcast, I was trying to explain everything, and I was like, all right, and here's what happened to Adrian this week. Like I don't know, I'm sure it'll tie in, but like I'm very confused by this whole thing. But I enjoyed the wackiness of it, and like almost like if you started life and then had it kind of in a bubble, just develop on its own, not like following any of the trends of how life on Earth develops, like wacky shit probably would happen. That kind of makes sense. It was just weird, but his performance was goddamn unbelievable. Awards kind of pissed me off in general. Like I saw, not to get too far off on a sidebar, but Jennifer Aniston and Reese Witherspoon both got nominated for The Morning Show, which is like really not that good of a show. And I read all these articles about how basically there's so much money going into it, and Jennifer Aniston's going around like shaking hands and stuff. That's how these nominations are getting landed. That's Golden Globes, not Emmys, but still, it's like, I don't know, man. There's something about it that's like, I can't put too much stock in it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's concerning when you hear stuff like that. But I think like you said, don't put too much stock in it.
Right.
They are just awards. I'm sure people that, are voting for these awards probably haven't even watched Watchmen yet. And it's like, all right, frig you then. It's our show.
Yeah. It's the same. I mean, Leftovers didn't win any Emmys. Much more famous. I'm just biased. Obviously, much more famously, The Wire, I don't think won any Emmys either.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's like a famous example of like, all right, so sometimes they get it wrong. Or it took Leo forever to win an Oscar, whatever. There's a lot of things like that. And the biggest example of that, though, was Reese got nominated for The Morning Show and not for Big Little Lies, which is pretty much universally a higher praised, critically acclaimed show. So it's like for them to both be eligible and she got nominated for one, not the other. It's like, maybe money plays a factor here a little bit too, but a little conspiracy theory stuff. But
I'm with you. I think money plays a big factor.
Yeah. Anyway, back to Watchmen. It's amazing how Lindelof sort of reshaped that Watchmen universe without undoing it, because he did add a lot of things to it. Like, I think the best example of all of this is Will Reeves and the whole story of Hooded Justice, because in the comics, there isn't even a hint that he may be a black guy, to the point where I doubt Alan Moore even considered that as an option. Maybe he did, but it seems like he was just clearly a white guy.
No chance Alan Moore considered that. No chance.
Right.
That's just the most unique. Everything about origins in this were phenomenally done. From Looking Glass's origin, him being in that, funhouse mirror place when the squid drops. And then the next episode, the black and white Will Reeves episode, that might be the best episode of the season. And usually episodes like that of television shows are panned. People don't like when you say, hey, we're going to keep the main story on hold. We're going to do a flashback episode, or we're going to do a black and white episode, a gimmick episode, if you will. That might have been the most overall, highly regarded episode of the season. So that, everything about Will Reeves, like you said, Lindelof just seemed to understand the source material he was working with better than I ever could have imagined anyone understanding it.
Yeah, and it's amazing because when you factor in how much it makes sense to almost have the imagery of like the reverse KKK robe with the the purple and
yep.
Whatever, and then the noose around the neck, and the fact that he was kind of an outcast among the other Minutemen, and he's the only guy who didn't reveal his identity and all this stuff when it became illegal to be a mass vigilante. It just made so much sense that he would be black. Like, it makes so much sense that I almost think if I went back and read the book, I couldn't see him as not a black guy, but I don't think there's any intent to make him that. So to have that fit so perfectly in there, it's genius level writing to even come up with that concept where it's like, of course he's black, even though I don't think he was. I know he's not like a main character of Watchmen, but still, it made so much sense. I feel like the world building that Lindelof did that built upon the world instead of rewriting it is almost the most impressive thing out of all of this.
No, I'm with you on going back and rereading it. I would never imagine Hooded Justice as anything more than a black guy. Will Reeves, he is, that whole origin, that is locked into canon in my mind. So I'm with you on that.
And the other part that I saw almost being criticized, maybe, especially in the first episode, was the Rorschach stuff, where I feel like a lot of comic book people were pissed that they kind of made that the face of this racist organization. People are like, that's not Rorschach, he's not racist. But that's not what they're saying. It's basically, Rorschach's dead. He's not in the show. A group of racists took Rorschach's journal, which, got left at a right-wing newspaper, and they perverted his message into their own doctrine, and that stuff happens all the time. I think even that made perfect sense in the world, however many, 1985 to 2019, however many years that is later, it would make sense if somebody would take that and then all wear masks, even if the actual character of Rorschach wasn't, the face of racism.
No, that was perfect. The whole way they tied in Rorschach's journal, even that brief scene we got where they were talking about the cavalry early on in the series, and they were showing the TikTok video and all that in the police station. That was perfect. It was another thing where I was like, God damn, he understands this. He gets it. Lindelof gets it.
Yeah, 100%. Now, I truly loved every episode of the show. The two standout episodes, I think you already mentioned the nostalgia one. I think the John Osterman sort of love story between him and Angela, the Dr. Manhattan episode.
No doubt. Those were the best two for me as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually have a soft spot for the Looking Glass origin story as well, but what was your favorite episode? What was the one, it doesn't even have to be an episode, or moment that kind of stood out from this season?
Episode would be the John one, the romance story. The way they used his I guess the way he interprets time, and the way they used that in that episode and sent us all around, and we kind of got to experience it like he does, sort of. I loved everything about that. The Looking Glass one, like you mentioned, was up there. Looking Glass's origin, the whole intro, the cold open to that episode, I don't remember if it was a cold open, but the whole intro to that episode might have been my favorite stretch we ever got in Watchmen. And for a moment, it might make me sound like a cheesy romantic, but the moment he falls in love with her right before they go out, I thought was like, that hit me hard. I was like, oh my God, he just hit that moment. And she obviously downplays it because she's panicked and she's running out and she thinks that she could save him. And she's like, oh, what is that supposed to be romantic? But it was. I thought it really was. So as far as moments, I think it might be like that for the show. And people are going to say that's crazy that was your number one moment from Watchmen. But they were really a trillion.
No, and I hear you. I feel like the more emotionally heavy like romantic moment, not even necessarily romantic, but even like the emotional moments between Will and Angela and like stuff like that, those are the ones that kind of hit harder. Even the random moments of tenderness between Cruikshanks and Adrian Veidt, I feel like those were nice.
Yes. Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah. So yeah, I think Lindelof's good at kind of painting those pictures. But I meant to ask you earlier, but I'm not supposed to ask you now. Have you ever studied a show like this before? But like basically, I know you're a huge fan of all this stuff, but with this podcast, the one you're doing, or whatever, video series, I don't know what the official term is.
Yeah, neither do we, if we're being honest.
Right. With Lights, Camera, Barstool, you're doing this, you're doing The Mandalorian. Have you ever done something where you're watching a show and studying, like taking notes and whatever, or is this your first kind of dive into that world?
I think it's probably my first dive into that kind of thing. I'll give credit where credit's due. A lot of the research that goes into our show is done by Jeff D'Lo, who runs, Lights, Camera, Barstool, the brand, the podcast, all of that stuff. So I was more, I wouldn't even call it studying, but I would just take little notes on my phone during the episodes. And then Jeff would come with really the heavy Easter eggy stuff. Other shows I've done that like similar things to, I paid attention to Breaking Bad this closely during the final season. I didn't watch Breaking Bad up until the final season. I marathoned it right before the premiere. But that final season, I was definitely really looking into the what's the title of the book that so-and-so is reading in the background of this shot? Could this tie in thematically? Or sure. I was heavy into Breaking Bad.
All right, cool, man. Well, thanks for the time. Closing thoughts on Watchmen. Overall, what are you thinking?
Overall, I think Watchmen will and should go down as one of the best seasons of television that has ever come out. And maybe that's recency bias. Maybe we'll look back and we'll say, hey, maybe we love that too much. But I really don't think it is. I think what Watchmen did, it was such a tiny target that they had to hit, and they hit a bullseye. It's stunningly impressive. It's a massive accomplishment, and I think Lindelof should probably take like 3 years off because the brain power that had to go into that show and all the Easter eggs he put into it, I cannot even imagine. So overall, I don't think I could be happier with that as a show, especially going in as a skeptic and not really knowing what to expect.
Yeah, for sure. I really feel like I saw somebody else post this. I think Damon Martin. You actually might know who that is. He also does it. Yeah, right.
Yeah, big fan of his.
Yeah, so you guys should absolutely do something together as well because it's the same sort of crossover with this kind of stuff and MMA or whatever. So if you guys collaborated on a podcast, something, it'd be great. But I saw him say that Damon Lindelof, between Lost, Leftovers, and Watchmen, he might be the best storyteller in like this past decade of television filmmaking, anything. And I think I agree with that.
Oh, he's up there. He's unquestionably up there.
Yeah, for sure. So I appreciate the time. Once again, I thank everyone for listening. Rate, review, subscribe, go to The Disorderly, all that. And thanks, man.
Yeah, thank you.
Bum, 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 bum.
By the way, I forgot to mention in part one of the podcast, or I guess during the interview with Robbie as well, Lube Man. It's pretty much confirmed that Lube Man, if you remember the guy who sprayed himself and slid into the sewer, dressed in all silver as Angela chased him, Lube Man is in fact Agent Petey. It was strongly hinted at in the latest Peteypedia entry, which is a memo detailing the firing of Agent Petey. He was let go because he was deemed a strong risk of being a mass vigilante. Also, they found a canola oil substance on his desk, and if you click on those two words, canola oil, it brings you to a picture of the Lube Man wanted poster posted by the Tulsa police. I actually did that by accident, too. I was trying to highlight canola oil, take a screenshot, and send it to my friend. And sure enough, as soon as I clicked it, it ended up being a hidden hyperlink. Pretty fucking cool. One last reveal from the brilliant minds at The Watchmen. Well, that'll wrap it up. Rate, review, subscribe to this podcast because we'll be back with more television companions. David St. Martin, Andrew Volpe, they're always doing movie reviews. We need more Trash with Ash, by the way. I'll talk to him about that. Those are my favorite. And then I'll probably do a little something for the year-end awards coming up. Lots happening. But thank you for listening. I'll catch you guys soon. Peace.